What, in your judgment, are the most serious objections to Darwinian theory?
Well, the first problem that I have, the first most serious objection to it, is the question of the nature of mutation. Now, as you know, that Darwinism is based on the idea that all the mutations which have been selected during the course of evolution were, when they initially occurred, entirely random, were never of any adaptive use to the organism. And this is the doctrine of the what you want to say, the non-adaptiveness of mutation. In other words, mutations are random, and when an organism has a mutation which in fact is advantageous to it, or that's purely fortuitous. Okay, so when an advantageous mutation occurs, it's fortuitous. This is the essential bedrock of Darwinism, that the mutational input into living things is, as it were, random. Now, the problem with this doctrine is that mutation is something we don't know much about. I mean, my own field is human genetics. And while I certainly accept that the deleterious mutations which occur in humans and cause human disease, I'm prepared to accept that they're random. But what I don't know about is the vast undercurrent of mutations which we don't really see, which may be neutral, which may have no particular deleterious effect and may not be particularly advantageous. And then there's the possibility of advantageous mutations occurring in nature, which we don't really know about yet, you see, or know nothing about. Mutation is a mysterious thing. And there's been recent work done by some people working in microbiology, which suggests that in some microorganisms, advantageous mutations may actually, as it were, be written in the genome by the organism itself. Now, this is a bit controversial. And I'm not saying that, in fact, sort of the idea that advantageous mutations can be, as it were, directed by the organism itself has been shown or proven, but there's been discussion recently, in the last few years, in scientific literature about this question. But what this discussion has revealed again, of course, is the mysterious nature of mutation. Now, when you come to the Darwinian claim that the whole tree of life grew from an input of random mutation, and what was selected, which was advantageous, was at its initial occurrence pure fortuity, this is a claim which is entirely, utterly unsubstantiated. It is impossible to say that the mutations, for instance, which led to the evolution of A or B or man, were built up during the course of time by the accumulation of mutations which were, as they initially occurred, entirely random. That is absolutely an unsustainable position. Mutation is a mystery. The claim that mutation during the course of evolution, the mutations which drove the tree of life, were in their initial occurrence in the organisms random, is absolutely unsubstantiated. And yet it's the foremost plank upon which the whole Darwinian edifice is based. And it's very interesting that after the recent discoveries in microbiology, that in my own university department where I'm working, there was a big flutter went through the orthodox Darwinists and evolutionists in the department, because they said, hey, supposing mutations can be directed by an organism towards its own advantage, supposing in fact the doctrine that mutation is always random isn't right. But as I say, the evidence isn't in on this, but it's a terrible reminder of the fragility of a claim that all mutations, and let's repeat this. Darwinism is claiming that all the adaptive structures in nature, all the organisms which have existed throughout history, were generated by the accumulation of entirely undirected mutations. That is, an entirely unsubstantiated belief, for which there is not the slightest evidence whatsoever. And moreover, it may be that there will never be that evidence, because those mutations occurred in the distant past, in genomes which have now disappeared, forever perhaps, from the view of man. That's the first problem. So the first claim, that random mutations are selected and create different forms of life, can't be sustained. The second problem is that getting a vast number, and we've already touched upon this earlier, there are a vast number of complex systems in nature, and no matter how unglamorous this problem is, and no matter how people try to look the other way, the fact is that a huge number of highly complex systems in nature cannot be plausibly accounted for in terms of a gradual build-up of small random mutations. Indeed, in many cases, there does not exist in the biological literature even an attempt to explain how these things have come about. A classic would be the lung of the bird. And I could mention some other ones, but everybody knows that the lung of the bird is unique in all vertebrates in being a circulatory lung rather than a bellows lung. And I think it doesn't require a great deal of profound knowledge of biology to see that an organ, which is so central to the physiology of any higher organism, its drastic modification in that way via a series of small events is almost inconceivable. This is something we can't throw under the carpet again, because basically, as Darwin said, if any organ can be shown to be incapable of being achieved gradually in little steps, my theory would be totally overthrown. The fact is that in common sense terms again, in terms of common sense, if you have no axe to grind, there are a vast number of such cases in nature. So the two serious objections are the assumption of randomness unsubstantiated, the claim that gradualism can generate the sorts of complex systems we see throughout the biosphere, as again, not only is it unsubstantiated, but in many cases I think it's actually beyond the realm of common sense that such things would ever happen.